Our call to worship comes to us this morning from Jan Richardson. Let them come, the questions that storm through the crack in the world. Let them come, the questions that crawl through the hole in your heart. Let them come, the questions in rage, the questions in fear. Let them come, the questions that whisper themselves so slow. The questions that arrive with breathtaking speed. The questions that never entirely leave. The questions that bring still more questions. Let them come, the questions that haunt you in shadowy hours, the questions that visit in the deepest night, the questions that draw you into rest, into dream, the questions that stir the awakening world. It is good we gather. It is good we gather together. It is good we gather together to raise up that which is worthy. And for all of you who were able to make it in here in person, you get 10 extra points on the universal scoreboard somewhere in the cosmos. And we love you, those of you who stayed home and kept your safety first and foremost in the midst of this wintry day. Please join in speaking the words that we say when we light our chalice. We have them in either English or Spanish. Please choose one. Encendemos esta llama para recargarnos de la luz de la verdad, la calidad de la comunidad y el fuego del compromiso.
Good morning. Welcome to Sunday morning worship at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Burlington. I'm Warren Baker, a member of the Worship Associate Team. A quick note that the nursery will be closed this morning. We encourage masking in this season of sickness. Thank you to those on the live stream who stayed home so you wouldn't pass on to others what you may already have. Whether you're in person or on the live stream, we're glad you are here as we join in the shared work of building community and making meaning in our lives. The shared values of love, compassion, equality, service, and justice guide this community. We welcome all who are welcoming. If this is your first or second time here, please raise your hands when we give you a special welcome. Welcome. We have a welcome ambassador today named Betsy Thayer. Would you please stand? There she is. So see here if you have any questions after the service about Unitarian Universalism or the fellowship here. Oh, so sorry. There you are in the corner. I forgot her name. Whatever it took for you to get here, you are welcome, just as you are. Three quick announcements. Learn about the Racial Justices Team Race Card Project today at 11:30 in the Susan B. Anthony Room. During coffee hour this morning in the community room after the service, tell the Radical Welcoming Committee at the table labeled OPC what you think about the Overdose Prevention Center planned for Burlington. Give your feedback from October's Climate Justice Revival to the Climate Justice Team during coffee hour today and next Sunday. You can see the results from that survey posted on the community room's west wall. Thanks. Welcome.
Hymn number 1003, that's in the
So we have a Time for All Ages story that is based on a much older story. It was written by Leo Tolstoy, and we might be able to see the adaptation by John J. Muth. We'll have the cover of the book in just a minute up on the screen, a children's version of it. And I welcome children to come forward if you want to be part of the story up here, but you can also stay with your grown-ups however you want to do that. Now, the first character you meet is kind of me, Nikolai. I'm both the narrator and Nikolai. And Nikolai, maybe you can connect with this feeling, feels uncertain in the world. He doesn't quite know the right way to act. And so Nikolai has three friends with whom he asks questions about life. And these friends are
Sonia, the heron.
Gogo the monkey, and
Woof, woof, Pushkin the dog.
And Nikolai told his friends, I want to be a good person, but I don't always know the best way to do that. If only I could find the answers to three questions, then I think I would always know what to do. Now, these three questions are, when is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? Now, Nikolai's friends, I'm so lucky, consider these questions.
To know the best time to do things, one must plan in advance.
Oh, okay. Now, Gogol the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves to find something good to eat, said,
You will know when to do things if you watch and pay close attention.
Pay close attention.
You can't pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall upon your head.
Nikolai thought for a moment. Then he asked his second question. Who is the most important one?
Those who are closest to heaven.
Those who know how to help the sick.
Those who make the rules.
Ooh, Nikolai thought some more. Then he asked the third question. What is the right thing to do?
Flying.
Having fun all the time.
All right. Okay.
Fighting.
Fighting? While Nikolai loved his friends and knew that they were all trying their best, those answers didn't seem quite right. Then he thought of asking Leo, the turtle, who lived for a very long time and lived there up on the mountains. Surely he must know. I'm going to go up there. Now, when Nikolai arrived, the very old turtle was digging a garden. I came here to ask your help. I have 3 questions. Maybe you can help me. Maybe you all actually could help me say them aloud so that old turtle can hear them. Are they here? Now, Leo, as you can tell, was listening carefully, but he didn't speak. He only smiled and then went on digging. Now, I think this turtle must be tired. This turtle is old and it's been digging a garden for a while. So, can I have your shovel? Can I dig? And Nikolai went on digging and dug the whole garden out. But just as Nikolai finished, a storm appeared. And everyone ran for shelter. But Nikolai heard cries, and went forward and found a panda who had been hurt in the storm. And Nikolai carried that panda into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg. And Leo, the turtle, smiled when he saw what Nikolai had done. And while the storm raged on, the next day there was a bright sky. The panda was feeling well enough to go home, using a stick to aid her, and as she left, she thanked Leo on her way out. As she went on her way, the 3 friends, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin, arrived to check on Nikolai and Leo. And Nikolai had been feeling peace for having helped someone, but still wasn't quite sure because still the answers were elusive. And so his gathered friends said, Have my questions been answered?
Your questions have been answered.
I don't get that. They have?
Yes. Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cry for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging in the garden. The most important one at the moment was me. And the most important thing to do was to help me in my garden.
Oh, okay.
Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg. And the most important one was the panda. And the most important thing to do was to take care of her and make her safe.
There is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you are with.
And the most important thing is to do good for the one who is at your side.
These, it turns out, are the answers to what is most important in the world.
It's time to sing our children and adults to faith development.
Hi, it's on. My name is Louis Darasset, and I love this faith community. My spouse and I have been members for about 18 years now, and this community has been here for us in so many ways. So I could pick, a dozen stories, but here's one that springs more or less immediately to mind. So picture the fall of 2020. I am the proud parent of a 9th grader who stands in need of education in sex, reproductive health, and sexuality. The public schools are not providing this education. This community had to adapt the curriculum, revamp the schedule, and somehow make it happen. And they did. They stepped up. Now, the revised schedule for Al that year did mean that my teenager was involved in Al education for perhaps 14 hours over the course of several weekends in order to get through the curriculum and to implement the infection prevention measures. She was a teenager. She was not the most enthusiastic participant. So we'd say, "Oh, Penny, it's time to go to Al," and she would sigh, and you've never heard such a sigh. It sounded like there was a gale force windstorm outside. And I turned to my wife and I said, Can she hurt herself by rolling her eyes that much? All right, but she got through it, and she got the education that she needed. So that's just one of the ways in which this faith community has been here for me and my family. And as I said, I love the community for this. Now, our faith teaches me that love that doesn't express itself in action is empty. And so we do our part to support the life of this community. That's why Penny and my spouse are downstairs helping lead religious education. That's why my daughter Adele is working the camera. And that's why I'm up here talking to you today. So this love for me is not abstract, not at all. I am a white Southerner. And for people who are in that social group, you can learn a lot about them and a lot about where they come from by asking, where were you, or in my case, your parents and your grandparents, in the 1960s when the schools were desegregating? So if Nona's watching on live stream, she knows that we have asked this question. It's not the most polite question, but it can be important to know where you come from. And unfortunately, things going on out there have taken a darker turn recently. I hope that this cup will pass from our lips, but I worry that people are going to be asking us, where were you in the 20s? And I'm very proud to say I have a good answer if this question has to come up. I was here. I answered the call when I was asked to do my part. And yes, I answered the call when I was asked to make a financial commitment to make sure that this community was here for people like me, for people like you, and for people like humanity. So, as I said, I love you. And if you'll have me, you got me for life.
If anybody is following the order of service, I am not Fred Person, I am Sarah Russell. And Reverend Karen asked me to read this poem this morning. It's Mary Oliver, Some Questions You Might Ask. Is the soul solid like iron? Or is it tender and breakable like the wings of a moth in the beak of the owl? Who has it and who doesn't? I kept looking around me. The face of the moose is as sad as the face of Jesus. The swan opens her wings slowly. In the fall, the black bear carries leaves into the darkness. One question leads to another. Does it have a shape, like an iceberg, like the eye of a hummingbird? Does it have one lung, like the snake and the scallop? Why should I have it and not the anteater who loves her children? Why should I have it and not the camel? Come to think of it, what about the maple trees? What about the blue iris? What about all the little stones sitting alone in the moonlight? What about roses and lemons and their shining leaves? What about the grass?
So today's service is a question box service. How many of you have been present in this congregation or another where there's been a question box service happening? Some of you, excellent, many of you. So over the past few weeks, I've invited folks to submit a question to me, and so I am going to answer some questions now, and then I'll have a chance to answer some questions. I like to say that I respond more than answer, because answer feels really intimidating. But I'm just setting the timer here to see how many questions we can get done. And as you've seen, some of the readings are all along the same thread, this idea that questions and questioning has a place in our spiritual life. So there were 2 questions on the same topic, so I thought I would start there. I won't be able to answer all the questions that were submitted, but I'll have a good go. This question that was asked twice is, worship? What do you use worship? What or whom are you worship? Actually, who are you worship? But grammarian and all that. So, first, grammar. I want to check in. How many of you know the difference between a transitive verb and an intransitive verb? Lots of you. Excellent. So, transitive verbs have a direct object. Intransitive verbs do not. So, an example of a transitive verb, I opened the door. The door is the direct object that I open, okay? Without a direct object, I open, it changes the whole meaning, right? I open as opposed to I open the door. An example of an intransitive verb, I shout. That is a complete thought. I can even shout loudly, but loudly isn't a direct object, it's just the way that I shout. So, while some religious traditions treat the action of worship as a transitive verb requiring a direct object to make sense, we do not. There is no object necessarily. There is no person necessarily. There is no deity necessarily to do the action of worship, the action of showing reverence, of bringing intention. So, grammar on one side, etymology on the other. You will recognize these words. I say them at the end of nearly every call to worship. It is good we gather. It is good we gather together. It is good we gather together to raise up that which is worthy. Now, this is not a coincidence, because the word worship means to raise up that which is worthy, to declare the worth, not monetary worth, but intrinsic worth of a thing. And this understanding comes from the origins of the English word worship, traced back to the 13th century. And I cannot pronounce the Middle English word from the root of this, but it means to refer to something that was full of worth. Now, I didn't know these things before I went to seminary. I see some of you nodding your head, so you know them without, or maybe you went to seminary, I don't know. But I know that when I learned this, some of the residue of my allergies to religious language, which some of us Unitarian Universalists have, went away. I didn't have to feel defensive about the use of word worship service for what happens on Sunday morning. I didn't have to correct other people when they said worship service, and I felt more comfortable with Sunday service. So if you suffer from that same ailment, I hope that answer helps you too. So there was a question about transforming hearts. This person said, I haven't heard anything happening in our congregation recently. What is going on? And so I reached out to a member of our Radical Welcome team, Martha Mulpus, and I thank her for some of the information here. Now, you might be familiar with Transforming Hearts if you've been a part of this congregation or another UU congregation, but for this congregation, before I arrived, Reverend Andre Mull introduced Transforming Hearts Collective to this congregation and the work that they do to celebrate, to make sure we have a wide and real welcome to folks who are trans, for folks who experience the whole wide, loving diversity of gender identity. Recently, the Radical Welcome team attended an online workshop titled Building Trans Justice and Safety. They did that on our behalf in October. And they are wondering, should we go forward with the newest iteration of how to be a welcoming congregation, Welcoming Congregations 2.0, because the first one was awesome, but really focused on L, G, B, and not so much T in the LGBTQ alphabet. So this might be something that you see that we do to make sure that we are meeting the moment, given what is happening in the world and given what our values are. I do want to say on March 23rd, the Sunday service here, we will be marking Transgender Day of Visibility, which is on March 31st. We're doing it a little early. And in fact, I get to work with one of our congregants, Cam, and we're going to do a workshop at UVM on how to create gender-affirming rituals as part of the Translating Identity Conference. It's something I'm really looking forward to. I have 2 minutes left. Okay, so this is super quick. It's the one I did the most research on, so I have to share it with you, even if the timer tells me I don't know. So, question, how did First UU come to own the buildings that we own? Something about being a landlord just doesn't compute. So I want to thank Woody Fulton for an essay he wrote a few years back, Els Curtis and her book, The Holiness of Happiness, which is a historical recounting of the first 2 centuries of this congregation. Gary Kowalski, former minister, and our Director of Operations and Finance, Christina Fulton, who helped me with the information I have, which is not everything we could know, and it won't answer the full question. But I'm going to just go a little bit further back and say, in 1797, the first charter for a religious institution here in Burlington, a church, was issued. But for years, there was no building, no minister. People would get sermons sent to them by mail, and they would read them aloud. Then there was a minister, but he got really busy becoming the president of UVM, so he stopped being the minister of that group. And within that group, there emerged two theological approaches, the Orthodox and the liberal. Which one are we? And so 2 congregations ended up being founded. The Orthodox became what is now what we know as First Congregational Church over on South Winooski. They have their founding date as 1805, and their first minister was Calvinist in orientation. From the liberal, we emerged. Our founding date is 1810, and at the time, we were called the First Congregational Society Unitarian. So I have actually, things that were meant for us, somebody found something in their attic, and they sent it there because it said First Congregational Society. It was from the 1800s, and they sent it on. No, wrong one. We got the name changed. Anyway. So our first minister, Reverend Samuel Clark, was a liberal Christian, and which was a forerunner of what we now call Unitarianism, and now Unitarian Universalism. And this congregation first met in the courthouse, but in 1814, some prominent members purchased for $1,000 5 acres on Pearl Street. $1,000. The parcels on the northern boundary was the public burying ground, what we now know as Elmwood Cemetery. And the land was mostly wooded and undeveloped. And a year after the purchase, the congregation decided to build a brick meeting house. Construction began in 1816. It took 7 months to complete and was dedicated on January 9th, 1817. So that's the backstory. In the 1840s, the congregation pursued turning the northern half, so 2.5 acres, into residential parcels. What is now Elmwood Avenue, it had been called Locust Street, opened on 1832. Grant Street came in 1860, and Clark Street was created in 1885. Our building, where our sexton used to live, on Clark Street, was built before the road was built. And that road was actually our land, so we came inside our boundaries to build the road. So those residential lots were created over 2 decades, between 1867 and 1886, and they were given permanent leases that would last, quote, as long as the wood grows and the waters run, unquote, for the sum of $25 annually, which we still collect with no adjustment for inflation. In 1880s, $25 was worth a lot more than it is now. So we don't own the land, but we do own the lease. At least I think that's how it's understood. We don't get to take back those people's homes just because we want to. But they do have to pay us $14, $25. It's really a weird thing. The buildings that make us a landlord, which also our parking lot does, right? Because we rent that out during the week. Those are over here on Elmwood Avenue. And they were built in 1903, so almost a whole century after we were founded. Why did we build buildings on those parcels as opposed to parceling them out and letting people to build their own homes? I do not know. In my short, week long to be able to research this, I couldn't find that out. But here's some context that we can then speculate and make up rumors about why. This is the thing. If I say it out loud, it's going to get written down. It'll go into the archives, and 20 years from now, somebody will say it's the truth. But we're going to risk it. Reverend Joel Hastings Metcalf served from 1893 to 1904, right? The decade just before and during when those buildings were built. And according to the book that tells us our history, he was the first minister to, quote, articulate the society's need to increase its official membership, unquote. It turns out, and for us folks in the 21st century, this will sound familiar, there was a crisis of membership, particularly that children raised in the church didn't stay on as adults. Either they left Burlington altogether, or if they stayed local, they didn't join the congregation. Does sound familiar. At that time, there was a noted loss of pew rentals. That's how we made our money. We had box pews, and people paid to have, that's mine, and they paid for that. So we lost income from there, and there was a decrease in donations from major donors. So I can't help but wonder if we built those buildings in order to have a new way to sustain income. There was also a big shift in Unitarianism. Reverend Samuel Eliot, who was the president of the American Unitarian Association, of which we were a part, he thought churches should get modern. They should adopt business ideas. And so I wonder, too, if there was a shift culturally within Unitarianism that said, oh, you congregations, you should learn some of the things that people learn from the business sector. We know that there was a parsonage somewhere. I don't know where. If you know where, please tell me. A parsonage is where the minister lives. But that existed in the 1820s, long before those buildings happened. One last thing, and I've definitely gone over my time here, is I reached out to the former minister, Reverend Kowalski, who served here for 21 years. And this is what he told me about the uses of the buildings in more recent times. Historically, they have been rented to organizations that align with the mission of the society. During the 1980s and 90s, one building was home to Vermont Cares. At that point, during the early hysteria over AIDS, the first UU was the only place in town willing to offer space to an agency supporting and providing health care to LGBT youth and adults. Let that sink in. Then in 1994, the building housing Vermont Cares was destroyed in an act of arson. Meeting the emergency, our congregation gave Cares temporary facilities within our own lower level. And while Greater Burlington rallied with generous donations to Cares, it was actually our congregation, the landlord rather than the renter, that bore the substantial cost of rebuilding. Out in the Mountains, a local news publication for the LGBT community, was another renter we were happy to host. And Christina told me that we also rented to 32 Elmwood to RU12, a community center, some of you might remember, for many years prior to the current tenants. RU12, was a queer community center that also housed Safe Space, an LGBTQ domestic violence agency, for some of the time that they were there. All of which is to say, I'm really glad we have those buildings. We're going to shift now to our spiritual practices, after which we have an invitation from our auction folks. So if you can do what it is your body needs you to do, to shift to a source, to be open to prayer or meditation, as we strengthen our resilience for life and love, for living, for liberty, as we say yes to spiritual practices here in this room and you on live stream. Let the spirit of meditation and connection to that yearning inside you for something larger be your company and your companion. This prayer is a prayer nearly word for word of a prayer offered a year ago. May we have the mettle and resilience to meet this moment at this vulnerable time in the life cycle of our democracy. May we do what is ours to stop the rise of fascism, not allowing the inclination towards resignation or the pernicious path of cynicism to be our guide, but following the lead of not knowing hope and the skeptic's determination to give it our all. May the earth know our love, and may we know the earth's love for all the creatures, including us. May this love be ever with us, present in our consciousness, not just on holidays and Earth Day, but on all days, helping those of us who have choice to make choices in service of generations to come and the least vulnerable now. May all who are unhoused, including those who are part of this congregation, know the warmth and protection of reliable shelter. May all who experience addiction, including those who are part of this congregation, know an end to the root hunger that drives disease, and may we, as a nation and a society, provide all we can to bring the scourge of addiction to an end, including opening an overdose prevention center. May all who know loneliness as their closest companion find a trustworthy human to lovingly reflect the whole of their self and unending opportunities to know their inherent worth and dignity alongside their connection to the interdependent web of all existence. Into this circle of care, we shout gratitude and joy for 30 years of Penguin Plunge, with a special shout and prayer for at least 30 more. And into the circle of care, we hold those federal workers who have been shunted into a precarious limbo, who face a deadline and then an extension and the cruel use of force. Into the circle of care, we hold those immigrants, regardless of their status, whose lives are filled with fear, whose movements have been narrowed in attempts to keep their families safe. And into the circle of care, we hold those judges and lawyers and legal staff who are working extended hours to help us resist the assault on our democracy. We name those who report good news to help us know that all is not lost and we too can do what is ours to do. And into this circle of care, we offer our loving embrace to those who have serious health diagnoses, new or long-term, known in their small circles or known widely, who keep living their lives and sharing the gift of themselves with us. And into the circle of care we whisper, perhaps just under our breath, perhaps loud enough for our pewmate to hear, perhaps silently as a caress to our own spirit, a name of someone who could use a little more of our love. Let us sit in shared stillness until the chime rings again. Amen.
In our generosity practice, we share half of the collection plate with a community partner that is living out our shared values, while the other half goes to sustain this congregation. Offerings this month will be shared with the Intervale Center, which implements innovative, replicable, and place-based solutions to address some of agriculture's most pressing problems. The Intervale Center is transforming the food system from one that is degrading, anonymous, and industrial into one that is restorative, familiar, and human scale, and is working to foster a local food economy that is good for people and for the planet. Learn more at intervale.org. Thank you for whatever generosity you can practice. During the upcoming stone ritual and offertory, you may place your offering in one of the baskets at the head of the outside aisles, or you may make your offering online. Another of our community practices is the stone ritual. When the music begins, come forward on the outer aisles to mark a joy, a sorrow, or a gratitude by placing a stone on the table here in front. Zoe pointed out to me that I was reading the wrong beneficiary for half of the plate. You saw it on the wall, so just I hope you were looking at that rather than paying attention to me. So let's say the words of our offering dedication. With gratitude, we dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our community, seek truth, and act for justice. And now, next in our service, we head out west for an invitation.
I'm so worried about my barn. It needs repairs, but I'm not bringing in enough from giving riding lessons to make all of them. What can I do?
What are you doing?
Worrying about my barn.
Yeah, it does need work.
That's why I'm trying to think of a way to raise money so I can keep up with repairs. And I want to add a new family riding lesson to the schedule.
Ooh, people really love those lessons.
They do. That's why it's extra urgent I think of a way to raise money.
Well, you could have a bake sale.
I'd have to sell a lot of brownies.
How about having a silent auction and a bake sale? Get people to donate stuff, then you sell it and use the money to make repairs.
That's a great idea. How did you think of that?
It was the flaxseed I had in my granola this morning.
That must be some kind of flaxseed. Well, I better get to it. Knock, knock.
Morning.
Howdy, I'm holding a silent auction and a bake sale to raise money to repair my barn and offer more riding lessons. Do you have anything you'd like to donate?
No, all my things are precious.
I can only take things that people really want to buy. It's got to be in good condition to start with. I need things like dishes and cups, maybe kitchen appliances you don't use anymore, recreation gear that only sits in your closet. How precious are your things?
Precious.
Could you spare just a bit of precious to help me give more riding lessons?
I'll have to think about that.
Thanks for doing that. It could really help us out. Well, I got a mosey. I'll check back later. Knock, knock. Howdy. I'm holding a silent auction and a bake sale to raise money to repair my barn, and do you have anything you could donate?
I try not to collect a lot of stuff.
Oh,
But, you know, I love to dance and cook, and play cards and board games and go on nature walks and help people with their gardens and have movie nights with all my friends. What if you auction some of these things off? Experiences, right?
excellent. That's a great idea. And thank you so much. Well, I better keep on keeping on. Knock, knock. Howdy, I'm
holding a silent auction and bake sale to raise money to repair your barn and offer more riding lessons.
Yeah.
Word gets around fast in this town. I'm new here, but I've heard about you and your mighty fine hat and your riding school. I can donate, but I want to make sure what I give will go to a good cause. Are you sure this is a good cause? Like a really, really good cause?
You know, you can donate some of your precious things or a special experience or a skill you got, but I gotta say, the good cause is your community here and what we can build together when all of us pitch in. And I don't think there's a better cause than that.
You know, I am a good knitter, and maybe I could take a few folks paddleboarding when the weather gets better. Oh, do you think folks would be interested in a yodeling lesson? Or maybe some yoga? Or maybe some yodeling yoga on a paddleboard?
Sure sounds interesting.
Hey boss, I added an extra scoop of flax to my granola and had another good idea.
Let's donate to all these generous folks something from our Western hat collection. And some line dancing lessons.
I've always wanted to try line dancing.
I love it when we can do things together. Let's make an occasion to
show off our hats. Save the dates for our live auction on April 12th, and the call for donations is open now.
Wow, I can see it now. Better barn, more lessons. Let's get started. Donations are open now, and you'll be able to find the link in places like the e-news, on Community Messenger. We better get line dancing to celebrate.
One of the questions was about, like, how do I prep for sermons and worship? And I can tell you that I vastly underestimated how long the service would go, how many questions I would be able to answer. So we're kind of shifting a little bit. There was going to be a reading. That's gone. I'm going to tell you some of the questions that were posed rather than answering all of them. Not all of them. So let me just say there were 2 questions about love. Does it exist? And then also, what is it? And that's next Sunday. Had been planned already, so sorry to make you wait. There were 2 questions about balance at this time. And I'm going to try and make sure to answer that a little bit, though I think that is a daily, weekly, monthly practice, how to answer that question. One is about kind of ethical eating and what is our Unitarian Universalist connection to that and this congregation's choices around that. There were other questions too, which I don't seem to have here in front of me. They might have just gone the way of not getting printed out. So let me just take on the one around balance, because I kind of think that that's a place where many of us are trying to find a reasonable balance between meeting my own spiritual needs and helping to meet the needs of others. This is one way to think about it. Another way this question was posed was, how do we practice resistance in the coming years while also avoiding stabbing ourselves with a second arrow of suffering, as the Buddha teaches? That parable that the Buddha shared orally and then was written down, this idea that pain exists and we cannot in this life avoid pain. That's the first arrow. But suffering, our relationship to the pain, that is something that we have some capacity to influence, the second arrow. So that was the reference in the question. I want to raise to you the Serenity Prayer, which is used in many 12-step programs. It was penned by Reinhold Niebuhr. And I'm not sharing it with you right now because I think this is the answer, but I do think for many people it is an answer, and I think being in relationship with it is helpful. So it started with God, grant me, many just skip the God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, there have been memes, abundant memes out there that have shifted this. One out there, God, grant me the patience to work with the unjust systems I cannot change today, the courage to strategically enact progress when I know I can, and the wisdom to know that despite structural oppression, I still can make a difference. I'm going to say that again, since it's not as widely known. God, grant me the patience to work with unjust systems I cannot change today, and the courage to strategically enact progress when I know I can, and the wisdom to know that despite structural oppression, I can still make a difference. We can still make a difference. So, We can think about what is going on in the world and the intentional efforts to overwhelm our cognitive and emotional senses by those who are in control of the media and currently in power in our federal system. Right? This is an intentional strategy on their part to overwhelm us, take away our sense of agency. We can think about 3 spheres of concern, influence, and control. So the sphere of concern is probably everything that we care about. Right, and sometimes it's more than we want to care about, but there it is, coming on, fire hose, rapid speed. So the sphere of concern. And then the smallest is the sphere of control. What we can control, impact, make a direct difference about. But in between that is the sphere of influence, where we still have the capacity as individuals, but more so when we are in a collective, to influence the directionality, where things are going. Right? So we may not be able to influence, and we certainly can't control everything in our sphere of concern. And when we bring our full attention to that all the time, not just sometimes, but all the time, we become overwhelmed. We lose our sense of agency and what we can do. And so we have to kind of dance between that sphere of concern to the sphere of influence or aspiration. I can influence this going, the direction it goes, especially when I am in solidarity with others. And sometimes we just have to go, today, all I can control is having my dog lay on my body to help me regulate my nervous system. I mean, that's theoretical. I'm not talking about my personal life. I have the best dog. Concern, influence, or aspiration, control. Don't stay in the control place, because other people who need you aren't there. We dance, we toggle. So that's my one question response that I hope it was the right one to share with you today, and not. Thank you. I actually am not sure what's next because
It's a hymn.
It's a hymn, because we need to regulate through singing, self-regulate. So Liam is going to help us sing a song that ends with how important it is that we bring questions and answers into our lives.
As recently mentioned, we can now rise and join in singing hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. Thank you very much.
Please join me in the words as we extinguish our chalice flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again.
May you know the blessing you already are. Right? Full stop. May you sense the blessing you yet can be. And may we all go out and be a blessing in the world.